Hey everyone, welcome back to Midnight Recaps. Imagine knocking on a stranger's door to talk about your faith, only to discover you've just walked into a house where leaving is impossible. Every conversation is part of a deadly game. Every choice is already planned, and the man in front of you is determined to destroy everything you believe. Tonight's nightmare is Heretic 2024. The movie opens with two young Mormon missionaries, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, sitting together as they talk about pornography. Paxton admits that she recently watched a video and ended up feeling sorry for the actress instead of judging her. The conversation gives us a quick look at their personalities before they head out for another day of missionary work. As they walk through town, they try to speak with people about their faith. Along the way, a group of teenage girls asks to take a picture with them, but it turns out to be a prank. One of the girls suddenly pulls down Paxton's skirt to see if she's wearing the so-called magic underwear, often associated with Mormons. The girls laugh and run away, leaving Paxton embarrassed. She tells Barnes that people constantly make fun of their religion, but Barnes says she has learned not to let those comments bother her. Not long after, rain begins to fall, and the missionaries arrive at the home of a polite Englishman named Mr. Reed. They introduce themselves, and Reed warmly invites them inside. At first, they hesitate because church rules discourage them from entering a home unless another woman is present. Reed assures them that his wife is in the kitchen baking a blueberry pie, so they agree to come in. Inside, Reed offers them drinks and starts chatting with them. He appears friendly and surprisingly knowledgeable about Mormonism. He even owns a copy of the Book of Mormon and asks thoughtful questions about their beliefs. During the conversation, they also talk about Barnes' father, who passed away from ALS, along with a few other random topics that make the discussion seem casual at first. The conversation eventually shifts toward religion. Reed brings up the history of polygamy in the early Mormon church and argues that Joseph Smith introduced it to justify his relationships with multiple women rather than because of divine revelation. According to Reed, religions often rewrite their own history to suit the people leading them. Barnes doesn't simply accept his argument. She explains that, from her understanding, polygamy served a practical purpose during the early years of the church by helping the community grow and survive. Once the church became established, the practice was officially discontinued because it was no longer necessary. Reed laughs off her explanation, but it's becoming clear that he isn't interested in learning about their faith. Instead, he seems determined to challenge everything they believe. After talking for a while, Barnes and Paxton ask if they can meet Reed's wife. He excuses himself and leaves the room. As they wait, Barnes notices that the blueberry pie smell isn't coming from a kitchen at all. Instead, it's coming from a scented candle sitting on the table. That's when they realize there may never have been a Mrs. Reed in the house. The two missionaries quietly decide it's time to leave. However, when they reach the front door, they discover it's locked. Their phones have no signal, so calling for help isn't an option. They head toward another part of the house, where they find Reed waiting in a study filled with books. Trying to remain polite, they ask him to unlock the front door, but Reed calmly tells them it won't open until the following day because it's controlled by a timer. Instead, he points them toward two different exits. One door is labeled belief, while the other is labeled disbelief. He tells them they are free to leave through whichever door matches what they truly believe. Barnes opens one of the doors, expecting to find an exit, but instead discovers that it leads down into a basement. At this point, both women realize they are trapped. Meanwhile, back at the church, Elder Kennedy notices that Barnes and Paxton never checked back in after finishing their scheduled visits. Realizing something could be wrong, he decides to retrace their route and begins searching for them. Back inside the house, the missionaries confront Reed and demand to be let go. They warn him that the church knows exactly where they are and will eventually come looking for them. Reed immediately calls their bluff, knowing they never actually reported their location. As they move through the library, Barnes secretly spots a letter opener and quietly slips it into her sleeve, hoping it might help if things get worse. Reed then surprises them by pulling out what appears to be an old Monopoly board. He explains that Monopoly was inspired by an earlier game called the Landlord's Game. He uses another example by comparing the air that I breathe by the Hollies to Radiohead's Creep, pointing out how one borrowed elements from the other. Using these examples, Reed argues that ideas are constantly copied and passed down over time. According to him, religions are no different. He believes every religion is simply another version of something that came before it, and he calls this the one true religion. After finishing his explanation, Reed gives the missionaries one final chance to choose a door. Paxton believes that agreeing with Reed and walking through the disbelief door might be the safest option if it means escaping. Barnes disagrees. She insists that whether they believe or not isn't what matters, and she refuses to let Reed manipulate their faith. In the end, both women decide to walk through the belief door together. Outside, Elder Kennedy continues going from house to house, asking if anyone has seen the two missing missionaries while trying to track down their last known location. The door leads Barnes and Paxton into an underground dungeon with no obvious way out. They quickly realize they've been trapped. Barnes tries to break through a small window, but it's far too strong. Knowing they may only get one opportunity to fight back, Barnes quietly hands Paxton the letter opener she took earlier. She tells her that if Reed gets close enough, she should stab him in the neck without hesitating because he seems to be watching Barnes more carefully than Paxton. A few moments later, an elderly, frail-looking woman, whom Reed calls the prophet, enters carrying a messy blueberry pie. Reed speaks to the missionaries through a speaker, telling them they are about to witness a miracle. According to him, the pie has been poisoned. He says the woman will die after eating it, only to come back to life a few minutes later. The old woman begins eating the pie and suddenly collapses. Reed instructs Barnes and Paxton to check her pulse for themselves. They do, and she is clearly dead. As they wait for the supposed resurrection, the front doorbell rings. Hoping it's someone who can help, Barnes and Paxton rush upstairs and scream as loudly as they can, but no one hears them. Reed answers the door and finds Elder Kennedy standing outside. Kennedy explains that he's looking for the two missionaries, but Reed calmly claims he has never seen them. With no reason to suspect anything unusual, Kennedy apologizes and leaves. Meanwhile, Barnes comes up with another plan. She and Paxton pull part of a rug close and grab some matches, hoping to start a fire in the basement so the smoke will attract attention. They hurry back downstairs, but before lighting the fire, Paxton notices something strange. The dead woman's body seems to have shifted positions. Barnes dismisses it and focuses on starting the fire. Just then, the old woman suddenly shows up, appearing to come back to life. She quietly describes what she claims to have experienced after death before saying, "It's not real." Reed enters the dungeon, proudly claiming that the women have just witnessed a genuine miracle. He tells them he is now willing to sacrifice one of them and bring them back the same way. Barnes isn't convinced. She tells Reed that what he just showed them wasn't a miracle at all. It was simply a magic trick. She then explains why she and Paxton never discussed Taco Bell. Years earlier, Barnes nearly died after suffering an E. coli infection. During that experience, she had what doctors would call a near-death experience, and what she saw was very similar to what the prophet had just described. To Barnes, that proves Reed simply coached someone to repeat a familiar story instead of performing a real resurrection. Before Barnes can finish explaining her theory, Reed suddenly slashes her throat. He calmly insists that she'll come back to life. Several minutes pass, but Barnes never wakes up. Reed then cuts into Barnes' arm and pulls out a small metal implant. He claims it's a microchip, arguing that Barnes was never real and that everything around Paxton is an illusion. Paxton immediately sees through the lie. She explains that the object is actually a contraceptive implant, not a microchip. She also figures out Reed's trick. According to Paxton, the first prophet truly died after eating the poison pie. While Barnes and Paxton were distracted trying to get Elder Kennedy's attention, another woman secretly replaced the body and pretended to be resurrected. Reed had given her a script describing the afterlife, but she unexpectedly added the words, "It's not real," exposing that the entire miracle had been staged. Reed smiles and says that if Paxton's theory is correct, then there must be another entrance leading into the basement. Paxton looks around and discovers a hidden trapdoor beneath a table. Wanting proof, she climbs down into the tunnel while Reed allows her to continue, claiming she is about to discover the one true religion. At the bottom, Paxton finds the original prophet's dead body, confirming that her theory was correct. She continues deeper into the underground passage until she reaches a room filled with old religious artifacts. Beyond that is another locked door. Using a key she already has, she unlocks it and enters another chamber, where several women are being held inside cages. Reed follows her into the room and asks one final question. What is the one true religion? Paxton finally understands everything. She explains that when they first arrived at Reed's house, they believed he had gone to speak with his wife. In reality, he had secretly taken the key from Barnes' coat, gone outside in the rain, unlocked their bicycles, hidden them, and then returned inside. That's why his hair was wet when he came back with the drinks. He later placed the bike key back into the wrong coat pocket. At first, they thought it was an innocent mistake, but Paxton now realizes it was done intentionally. Reed wanted her to find the key later so she would unknowingly follow the exact path he had planned for her. He even instructed one of the captive women to lock the final door using the bicycle lock. Every decision Paxton believed she had made was carefully manipulated from the very beginning. Paxton concludes that Reed's one true religion isn't Christianity, Mormonism, or any other faith. It's control. Reed smiles, pleased that she finally understands. But before he can react, Paxton suddenly stabs him in the throat with the hidden letter opener Barnes had given her earlier. She runs toward the exit, but Reed manages to catch up and stabs her in the stomach before collapsing from his own injuries. As both of them lie bleeding on the floor, Reed tells Paxton to pray. Paxton replies that prayer doesn't magically solve problems. Instead, she believes it's simply an act of hope and kindness. Even so, she begins praying. As Reed crawls toward her to finish the job, someone suddenly strikes him in the head with a wooden plank covered in nails, killing him instantly. The person holding the plank is Barnes. Although mortally wounded, she had survived just long enough to save Paxton one last time before finally collapsing. Paxton eventually finds a window leading outside and escapes the house. As she steps into the sunlight, a butterfly lands gently on her hand. Earlier in the film, she had said that if she ever died, she would want to return as a butterfly so she could watch over the people she loved. She looks away for only a moment, and when she looks back, the butterfly is gone. That's the end of tonight's recap. What did you think of this movie? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're craving another terrifying story, tap the video on your screen right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.